Have you ever felt that you are being pulled in all directions at once and that every area of your life demands your attention at the same time? I often feel that way. I want to be a good wife, a good mother. I want to be a good pastor and a good neighbor and a good citizen. And my garden is overflowing with weeds, and the laundry needs to get done, and a car needs to go to the shop, and so many emails need to get answered. It may seem that demands coming at us from all directions is a modern problem. But when we open the Bible and read today's story from the fifth chapter of the Gospel of Mark, we see that actually it is a problem that people have faced at all times. Even Jesus faced that problem. Jesus likewise was pulled in many directions. Wherever he goes, great crowds begin to gather. People everywhere tug at his sleeves and beg for help. A leader of the synagogue rushes forward, falls on his knees, and begs repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." And Jesus agrees and comes with him. But then on the way, he gets interrupted by a woman in the crowd who also desperately needs his help. And as I picture Jesus responding to these various needs, I can see not only his love and his compassion, but also a pattern for life, a pattern of responding to requests coming from every direction, and how to stay centered and grounded when that happens. The response of Jesus reminds me of a story by Leo Tolstoy, a story called The Three Questions. And it goes like this. Once there was a certain king, and it occurred to him that if he always knew the right time to begin everything, and if he knew who were the right people to listen to and whom to avoid, and above all, if he always knew what was the most important thing to do, then he would never fail in anything he might undertake. And once this thought had occurred to him, he proclaimed throughout his kingdom that he would give a great reward to anyone who would teach him what was the right time for every action and who were the most necessary people and how he might know what was the most important thing to do. And many learned people came to the king. Some of them even brought charts and timetables to show him how to determine the best time for everything. But they all answered his question differently. And the king agreed with none of them, and he gave the reward to no one. But he still wished to find the answers to his questions, so he decided to consult a hermit who lived in the woods and who only received common folk. The king put on simple clothes and went to the woods alone. He found the hermit digging the ground in front of his hut. The hermit greeted the king and went on digging. He was frail and weak, and each time he stuck his spade in the ground, he breathed heavily. The king went up to him and said, "I have come to you, wise hermit, to ask you to answer three questions. How can I learn to do the right thing at the right time? Who are the people I should most pay attention to? And what affairs need my first attention?" The hermit listened to the king, but answered nothing. He just spat on his hand and continued digging. "You are tired," said the king. "Let me take the spade and work a while for you." "Thanks," said the hermit. He gave the spade to the king and sat on the ground. They both took turns and worked the ground for a long time. The sun began to sink behind the trees, and the king was disappointed. He had not received an answer and decided to return home. Just then, a bearded man came running out of the woods. He fell to the ground and he fainted. His clothes were soaked with blood, and the king and the hermit discovered that he had a large wound in his stomach. They washed the man as best as they could. They bandaged him, they gave him water to drink, and carried him inside the hut. They laid him on the bed. It was now very late. The sun had long set, and all three men were so tired they fell asleep just where they were. The next morning, the king woke up and looked around in wonder. The stranger stared at him with shining eyes. "Forgive me," the stranger said in a weak voice. "I do not know you, and I have nothing to forgive you for," the king said. "You do not know me, but I know you. I am your enemy, and I swore revenge because you executed my brother and seized his property. I knew you had gone alone to see the hermit, and I resolved to kill you on your way back. But a day passed, and you did not return. So I came out from my ambush to find you. And I came upon your bodyguards, and they recognized me and they wounded me, but I escaped from them. I would have bled to death if you had not dressed my wound. I wished to kill you, but you have saved my life. Now, if I live and if you wish it, I will serve you as your most faithful servant, and I will bid my sons to do the same. Please forgive me." The king was very glad to have made peace with this enemy, and even more glad to have gained him for a friend. He went out in front of the porch and looked around for the hermit. Before going away, he wished once more to beg an answer to his questions. The hermit was outside on his knees, sowing seeds in the beds that had been dug the day before. The king approached him and said, "For the last time, I beg you, answer my questions, wise man." "You have already been answered," said the hermit, still crouching on his thin legs. "How answered? What do you mean?" asked the king. "Do you not see?" replied the hermit. "If you had not pitied my weakness yesterday, and had not dug these beds for me, but had gone your way, that man would have attacked you and you might have lost your life. So the most important time was when you were digging the beds. And I was the most important man. To do me good was your most important business." Afterwards, when that man ran to us, the most important time was when you were attending to him. If you had not bound up his wounds, he would have died without having made peace with you. So then he was the most important man, and what you did for him was your most important business. So then remember, there's only one time that is important, and that is now. It is the most important time because it is the only time when you have any power. And the most important person is the person you are with. And the most important thing to do is to do good for the one in front of you. Here ends the story as told by Leo Tolstoy. Now, when we look at the Gospel of Mark, we can see how the ministry of Jesus embodies the same wisdom. Even when people press at Jesus from all sides, even then the most important person is the one in front of him, and that person has his full attention. At first, it is the father who pleads for his daughter, and this father has his full attention. But then comes the woman who suffers with her unbearable hemorrhage. And then this woman has his full attention, and caring for her need is the most important thing to do. Can you see how these three principles about the most important time and the most important person and the most important thing to do, how these three principles bring a wonderful sense of clarity and order to our lives? But they require from us a sense of trust and acceptance. We must trust that all situations, no matter how desperate and urgent they might seem, that all other situations and people can wait, and that with God's grace, there will be a time to respond to them. Now, some of you might have been listening to this sermon and might be saying to yourself, if only I had such problems. I am never pulled in any direction. I am all by myself in my little apartment. My days are not at all hectic. They are long and boring, and no one ever seems to need me. No one is asking anything of me. I am useless and forgotten. But you know what? Even here, the three questions can guide you. If you are all alone, then the most important person is you. The most important person to love is yourself. The most important time is now. And the most important thing to do is to care for your body, for your mind, for your spirit, for your soul. Actually, this might be an important place to begin, even for the very busy people. Sometimes our schedules are overflowing not because of external demands, but because of an inner void, a hole in our heart, a woundedness, a deep seated sense of insecurity and inferiority. And this inner void leads to a constant need to prove ourselves, a constant need to be needed, to be affirmed, to be acknowledged, a constant need for attention. And in our quest for affirmation and attention, we take on too many projects, we overload our plate, we burn the candles at both ends, and in the end, we are depleted and exhausted. A long time ago, I served a congregation that was mostly straight, but there were two lesbian women. They were a couple very devoted to each other, and they were well liked and respected by the congregation. This couple was very dedicated. They served on many committees. They were often the first to show up when the doors of the church opened and the last to leave. When no one signed up for the coffee hour, they said, "Don't worry, we've got it covered." When no one volunteered to usher, they stepped up. Their dedication was admirable, but also a bit disturbing. It was as if they had to prove week after week that they were good Christians and good church members. And I often wondered, what have they suffered? What had they endured? How had they been rejected or shamed or hurt to have arrived at such great need to prove themselves? Now, how might the three questions apply to their situation? In the case of a great inner wound, a wound that might lead a person to a constant need to be needed. Again, the most important person is one's own self and the ability to say, I am enough. I am a beloved child of God. I don't have to prove my worth with constant activity. And the most important time is now, to stop now, not when all the work is done, but right now. And the most important thing to do is to claim our wholeness, to live in forgiveness, and to go forth in peace. And so, my prayer for all of us this week is this: may God grant us the wisdom in any given situation to discern the most important time and the most important person and the most important thing to do. And then may God grant us the courage to act in accordance to this wisdom. Amen.